Thank you so much, Provost Brewster, students, faculty, staff, and honored guests. Whenever we select a commencement speaker, we seek out an individual who has achieved a certain level of respect and renown in their field. Sometimes we're even fortunate enough to attract one who has achieved a level of celebrity. Today's speaker is unique in that he did achieve a level of celebrity most of us can only fantasize about, but gave it all up to forge a new path in psychology and mental health. Most of you know Ryan Dusick as one of the original members of the rock band Maroon 5. Dusick was the group's drummer from its founding as Kara's Flowers in 1994 to his eventual departure in 2006, a period that included the release of Maroon 5's studio debut, Songs About Jane, which has sold more than 10 million copies worldwide and is certified quadruple platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America. They played tour dates in 17 different countries and performed alongside artists ranging from Michelle Branch and Matchbox 20 to Stevie Wonder and the Rolling Stones. Unfortunately, the rigors of constant travel and performing aggravated an old sports injury, and Ryan made the difficult decision to leave Maroon 5 in September of 2006. He spent the better part of the next decade searching for identity, direction, and meaning before beginning his recovery journey in 2016. That journey inspired him to become a mental health professional. And since earning his master's degree in clinical psychology from GSEP in 2021, he has published a memoir of his journey, Harder to Breathe, which spawned a podcast of the same name last year. He has developed a counseling system called Get Curious, specifically tailored to the unique mindsets and circumstances of musicians and other creative professionals. Leaving one of the world's most popular bands for the sake of his own physical health was a courageous choice, as was his decision to admit he needed help. Devoting his life to servant leadership and helping others was a selfless choice. They are the kinds of choices we hope each of today's graduates will find it within themselves to make, and we are fortunate to have the chance to hear Ryan speak from the heart about those choices today. Because his unique journey is so reflective of Pepperdine's ideals of purpose, service, and leadership, I am proud and delighted to present Ryan Dusick, member of the class of 2021, as a recipient of this year's Distinguished Alumnus Award and the commencement speaker for the class of 2025.
Hello. Thank you to the Pepperdine Graduate School of Education and Psychology for this tremendous honor to be acknowledged by my alma mater just 3 years after my graduation is surprising and humbling. I had figured it would take at least 4 or 5 years for this to happen. But just 9 years ago, I was struggling at the very depths of despair, grieving the loss of my first career as the founding drummer of Maroon 5. I was riddled with anxiety and depression and gripped by a dependence on alcohol and medication. I had sunk to the bottom of a very deep, dark hole, fraught with low self-esteem, suffering from a lack of connection to any sense of purpose or meaning in my life, and having no concept of what recovery from these conditions could possibly look like. But on May 29th, 2016, I took my last drink in the parking lot in the parking lot of the Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, California. And I began a whole new chapter of my life, one filled with new connection, new purpose, and new meaning. Now, the first part of my recovery was focused on my addiction. But even then, I was already gaining profound tools to overcome my anxiety, and to process the traumas that had sent me into that dark place. Perhaps most importantly, I began to find inspiration in one simple word: service. In early recovery, being of service simply meant being present, compassionate, and helpful to my peers. Offering an empathic ear and a helpful hand to those still struggling became the source of connection and purpose I had been lacking for almost a decade. And for the first time in a very long time, being of service provided me with a feeling of self-respect and self-worth. The simple act of providing compassion to my fellows fostered something in me I had been lacking ever since my personal struggles began. And that was self-compassion. Now, as graduates currently or soon working in the field of psychology, you all know a little something about compassion. By nature, we therapists, psychologists, behaviorists, researchers, and teachers, we tend to be empathic people. It's what drove us into this field in the first place, right? But very similarly to the artists and performers of my first career, we who feel and care the most often forget to extend that same compassion to ourselves. Now, in the second part of my recovery, I became a volunteer. I worked at a CBT-based outpatient clinic, intensive outpatient clinic called the Matrix Institute on Addictions, as a peer support and co-leader of groups. I was getting quite good at being of service. I wore my heart on my sleeve and made the wellness of our clients my #1 priority, partly because I cared about these people and their sobriety, but also because it just made me feel good to know that I could offer something of value to a clientele who greatly needed it. In the process, however, I was beginning to get a little anxious again and a little stressed out, perhaps because I was getting a little over-involved. The wellness of our clients had become all-consuming to me because being of service to them had become my greatest purpose and identity. And I could see that it was beginning to affect my mental health. I'm sure that some of you caregivers and caretakers out there can relate to what I'm describing. But one day, the therapist who ran that program said something I have made an important part of my mindset to this day. She said, "Ryan, you're doing enough. You show up to these classes, you share your experience, you offer a vision of what life in recovery could look like, and most importantly, you provide our clients with the compassion they so badly need right now. When you walk out of these doors at the end of class, you don't need to take their problems with you. You've done enough." Now, in graduate school, we hear terms like burnout and compassion fatigue. We hear implorations such as, "Don't work harder than your clients," and "Make sure to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else." Now, these phrases can often sound like platitudes, but these sentiments go all the way back to the Bible and Jesus himself, who said, "Physician, heal thyself." Now, I don't have as much experience as some, as I've only been seeing clients for a little over 4 years now, but I've worked long enough in this field to know that I'm no good to anyone if I'm not taking care of myself. Now, I've observed in my peers and colleagues that the very best clinicians are those who are currently doing the work of recovery themselves and paying it forward to their clients as their cups runneth over. Now, self-care has become something of a buzzword in pop culture, and often people pass it off as something you might do to treat yourself on occasion, like going to the spa for a facial or a mani-pedi. But as mental health professionals, the onus is on us to make self-care our regular routine. We give so much of ourselves in the work we do. We give our time, our patience, our understanding, our thoughtful feedback, and a whole lot of mental and emotional energy in doing so. But we cannot give all of ourselves and expect that to be a sustainable way of living and working in this field. Now, self-care is actually pretty simple. Take care of yourselves, right? Prioritize sleep, nutrition, exercise, having fun, relaxation, relational health, and working through the issues that may be lingering in your own psyches due to past traumas or current mental health concerns. In other words, do for yourselves the work you ask your clients to do for themselves. Let me say that again. Do for yourselves the work you ask your clients to do for themselves. If you do that, you will be a much more effective clinician. And as an added bonus, you'll be a much more balanced and contented person. Imagine that. But when we neglect these things, we suffer, and our work suffers. So remember, good self-care is good patient care. Let me say that again. Good self-care is good patient care. Now, my self-care routine looks like this. I play softball every weekend because it nourishes my baseball-obsessed inner child. I host a mental health themed podcast called Harder to Breathe because it's an outlet for my passion, but also because it fosters my creative side, which is another essential element to my happiness. I start every day with a mindfulness routine of stretching and breathing, meditating to find my center, and I end every day by prioritizing my rest and sleep because I know that everything I do, I will do better if I'm showing up as the best version of myself. Now, we live in a culture that very highly values work ethic and productivity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But remember, it's very important to remember that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is rest. Now, in this day and age, healing work is needed more than ever, which is why it's imperative that the healers heal themselves. I learned this lesson pretty early on in my development as a therapist because my work is an outgrowth of my own recovery. But whether or not you have those kinds of challenges in your past, the current challenge is the same, working in the field that we do. Don't wait for the burnout to happen. Don't wait until you're overwhelmed and fatigued by the amount you're giving of yourselves to your work. Be proactive rather than reactive. Know your limits. Know your boundaries. Know what you need to live and perform at your best. And your impact on the people you seek to help will be that much greater as a result. Thank you so much again for this honor. You know, in my earlier career, I performed to crowds of thousands, sold millions of albums, and won prestigious awards as the drummer of Maroon 5. But quite honestly, being of service as a therapist, author, and advocate is the most meaningful and most fulfilling part of my journey thus far. And my time at Pepperdine was an enormous turning point in making this chapter of my story possible. I went from being a guy in relatively early recovery from some pretty severe mental health challenges to a thriving mental health professional. And during that time, I wrote a book about my journey called Harder to Breathe, a memoir of making Maroon 5, losing it all, and finding recovery. And I received from this program the tools to be of service in a greater way than I even thought possible. So I will always be grateful to this university for playing such a pivotal role in my personal development and professional success. Now, I want to give a very heartfelt mention to one professor in particular, Dr. Barbara Ingram, who was my mentor and champion through much of my time at Pepperdine. Beyond what she gave me as a fabulous teacher, she graciously offered me my first job in this field as a teacher's assistant in one of her graduate classes. And she wrote a very sincere letter of recommendation that landed me my first practicum traineeship position. Now, she cared very deeply about her students and their development both as clinicians and as people, and we all owe her a huge debt of gratitude for her long, distinguished career at Pepperdine University. Thank you, Barbara, for what you did for me and for all of your students. May you rest in peace. You will be missed. And thank you all here today. Good luck to you graduates in this wonderful journey of service and meaningful, impactful work. But remember, take good care of yourselves before and while you take care of your clients. And your lives and careers will thrive even beyond what you first imagined when you entered this ever-important field of psychology. Thank you again, and good luck on your journeys.